Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Today, we're going to kind of walk into our civil rights station, right? Our previous video, we talked about how we are going to move throughout this channel, okay? So today, we are in the civil rights station. Today, we're going to talk about something that I find to be structurally very odd. And honestly, it's historically like out of alignment, right? It's historically out of alignment. On November 25th, move my slide so that you might see it. On November, let me move this slide actually. Let me move this sequence right here. Okay. So on November 25th, the Department of Justice announced it planned to open a brand new Second Amendment rights section, right? Okay. So they wanted to open a brand new Second Amendment rights section inside of the Civil Rights Division. Okay, that's this article right here. I get a nice little screenshot. So what, you can get your receipts. I'm going to keep it on this slide for a second just so you can collect your receipts if you were not aware. Please feel free to get that receipt right now. And also know that you can look it up in Reader's Journal. That's where I got this article from. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting, right? This is supposed to launch on December 4th. Today is December 4th. But as of today, there was no confirmation that the office actually opened. So I'm curious why they have us on pause. Like, why is there silence? You know what I'm saying? And to me, the silence is just an interesting, better yet, I'll put it this way. The silence is just as interesting as the announcement itself, right? Because civil rights structurally have very specific historical meaning, right? When you say civil rights, that has a very specific historical meaning, right? It's a very specific historical meaning. So today, I just wanted to walk you through why this reframing is like really peculiar to me. What civil rights historically kind of covered for anyone who may not be familiar. I know that on my platform, people who are not necessarily within the United States also view my channel. So just wanted to make sure I can offer just a little bit of an idea there. And then why this shift feels like out of place inside the machinery like they chose. Like, why did you pick the civil rights as the particular machinery that you wanted to like utilize? Like, that's the piece that I'm really trying to wrap my brain around, and I want us to do this together, right? So I'll move this slide over so I can talk a little bit more freely without having to move the slide. So when we say civil rights, right? When we say civil rights, we're talking about rights that people were denied, right? Things that were written that it seems, right, that it should apply to you regardless of your identity, right? But people, for some reason, were still denied access to those rights, right? People denied, like, I don't know if people even think about the fact that people literally had to fight. We're talking MMA style, like really having to go out there and fight for their lives. We're talking about people being hosed down. We have documentation for it. We're talking about people literally being assaulted. Quite literally being assaulted. Civil rights protections weren't just like handed out freely. This is something, when we talk about each protected group, each group had like their own movement like literally each committee or like community rather, like they literally had to fight, and often several of them are still like making movements within the movement, right? You're still having to fight for their rights. Okay, try to stick with my notes. Like, I don't think people sometimes understand when we talk about civil rights that like these communities were like blocked, excluded, and harmed, right? Specifically blocked, excluded, and harmed, so that they could access these rights. So for me, this thought is really kind of personal, right? Like, my parents are baby boomers, and they were both born before 1964, meaning that they were not born with the right to vote. They inherited this right, the access to this, by the time they became of voting age, but they were not born with the right to vote. As a matter of fact, I looked at both of their birth certificates, and it quite literally says Negro. It says Negro. They inherited that right because of the civil rights movement, right? It forced the nation to expand to those, right? Expand it and recognize them as fully human under that law, right? So to make sure you understand and conceptualize that, it expanded so that they were recognized as fully human under the law. But here's like the contradiction, right? Here's the contradiction. Even though my father didn't have the right to vote, right, when he was born, he didn't have the right to vote when he was born. He was still expected to sign up for the draft, right? And like, I do have uncles who were drafted. And I think it's interesting, even like, to follow that legacy, to follow like that family lineage, right? My baby brother had to register for like the selective service just to get access to FAFSA so he can go away to school, go to college, right? And any male who has utilized FAFSA in general, you have signed up for that selective service, right? So as a black man, right, he could be denied the right to vote, but still be required to serve and die for a country that didn't acknowledge his civil rights, right? Like, because keep in mind, at the time he was born, it was not extended to him. He inherited by the time he was able to vote, and very much educated me in my civic duty, so certainly he's a voter. But just to think about that in that process, right? That is what like civil rights usually kind of means, right? It means a group was systematically denied access to something that should have been allowed. Should have always been allowed. They should have always had access to. But they had to fight. Okay? They had to fight. So this is why I wanted to make sure I spent a little time talking about this, because we're going to talk about the Second Amendment element, right? And we want to kind of give ourselves some time to really kind of compare. One is more constitutional and just universal. Like, they don't say, oh, this is because of your identity, you can't have access to this. Whereas when it comes to civil rights, it often is the question. So, like, think of each civil rights category, like, and how it, like, emerged, right? Think about, like, Black Americans, how they fought for recognition and equal rights. Women fought, you know, during the suffrage, right? So you have the 1920 time frame. And then fought again in the 1960s because civil rights still excluded them. So think about that. Like, they fought for the right to vote and fought for certain rights in 1920. And then still had to also still come back in the civil rights movement that occurred during the 60s because it still excluded them. Disabled or differently abled communities fought for ADA protections. A lot of things that people experience as like certain like let's say like resources like your text to talk feature and things like that. That was initially designed for that ADA community, right? Certain like ADA protections. And to be honest, that community is still fighting and still has to fight. That's still very a young movement, surprisingly enough, right? Still has to fight. Still has to fight. You have like the LGBTQ community who fought for decades and can once again continues to fight. As they kind of expand out, right? They continue to have to fight. Neurodivergent and developmental disability communities, right? The neurodiverse space still have to fight. And what I have observed is that their votes often get questioned. So they still have to fight. They are all fighting. And then there are more communities that fall under civil rights. But just to give you those like visual examples, right? Every one of these communities represents a community, or better yet, every one of these categories represents a community that had to say, please acknowledge me. Please let me vote. Please let me exist safely. Let me live safely in my own skin. Please let me participate. My mic is showing me I'm a little loud, so I apologize if I'm a little loud. These are civil rights. They were born from denial and discrimination. Okay? So the contrast with that of the Second Amendment right? We want to like just compare that a little bit to the history of the Second Amendment right? You gotta really think about it. There's no situation where anyone said your identity cannot, bear the right, to an arm, right? There's never been a situation I can recall, right? It's quite literally the Second Amendment that you were provided. It's encompassed in the Bill of Rights. Like, the right to bear arms has never been dependent on your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your religion, or your identity. No one had to march, protest, get hosed down in the streets, or vote on whether one group gets guns or the other one does or does not, right? That's never been a point of discussion. It is a constitutional right. Fundamental. Is part of the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10, right? It's the second one right after speech. Literally the second one right after speech, right? You can speak freely. You also have the right to bear what? An arm. So civil rights historically were needed because groups were excluded, right? The exclusion element. And the Second Amendment was never identity restricted. So why take a right that was never denied by identity and place it under an enforcement body meant to protect people from discrimination, which is associated with what? An identity. And then here's where the next piece that kind of gets me. It's like, here's where timing matters as well. Because all year long, we have watched. They, like DEI being dismantled, civil rights staff like shrunken, disability being recategorized in a multitude of ways, gender protections challenged, voting access restricted in certain states, a 43-day shutdown that hit federal workers the hardest, right? Because it's a government job. An entire civil rights framework questioned on, or rolled back rather, right? It's like it's questioned or rolled back. The entire framework throughout this year, we just watched different sections be like systematically targeted, right? Just boop, 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 boop. So at the same time that we're doing that, at the same time, communities who have historically been denied rights are fighting just to keep what they have gained throughout these several years in these various elements of movement, of movements that all are absorbed into like the civil rights movement, so to speak, right? The government announces a brand new office to protect a right that was never collectively denied. It was never collectively denied. And not only that, they placed it inside of a civil rights division, which traditionally protects the most marginalized group in the country. Like, you can restructure all you want. I mean, and even then, that's kind of like, turn my mic down a little bit. It's kind of banging. Hopefully, that's a better sound. But you can structure anything like you want, but placement, like, that tells a story. That definitely tells a story. Placement signals like priority. And their silence, right? That's very telling as well. The office was supposed to open today. Today is the 4th. I wanted to at least give it till noon before I came up live and like wanted to discuss it. I wanted to see if something gonna pop out. And at this point, we haven't seen any confirmation. There's no press release, no updates, no ribbon cutting, nothing. The only thing I could find was the one original article that I found. No updates. And when government loudly announces a structural change but goes silent on activation day, that's the receipt. Oh, that's the receipt. Y'all getting a good receipt nice and early. It means something is happening behind the scenes. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's like logistical. But silence itself, that is data. That is data, and it's a receipt. It is a receipt, and we getting it hot, right? When I tell you we gonna eat on this page, the buffet. This is a receipt, y'all. This is a receipt. I'm not here to speculate about motives. I'm not going to do that. I'm here to map out patterns, though. I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to map out a pattern. And the pattern is, let me go pull back my other part of my PowerPoint so y'all can see. The pattern is, go back to my upper piece of my notes so I can stay on topic here because I'm getting so passionate. The pattern is long-standing civil rights protections decreasing. New constraints applied to marginalized groups, right? And suddenly, a constitutional right elevated into civil rights machinery. This machinery that was designed to help protect disenfranchised groups, marginalized groups. So the civic question becomes, why redefine what civil rights means in 2025? Because that's what's happening, right? They're systematically coming at every angle. Why are they seeking to redefine it in 2025? Why now? Why this? Right? Why now? Why this? When the definition of civil rights changes, the consequences ripple across voting, the differently abled, community, and the overall definition of disability, education, gender, housing, employment, everything, right? That's what we're watching. We're watching that how this is about to change everything. I'm not here to tell anyone what to think. I'm here to give you like structure, history, and patterns. So you can see the moves for yourself. I want you to look up the clip for yourself. That's why I put it there so you can get that receipt. I want you to let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this office actually opened today? Because that's why I'm curious. Do you think it actually opened? Even though they didn't say anything. Do you think it actually opened? And what do you think it means when the line between a constitutional right and a civil right starts to blur? So as always, let's get into these receipts. You know, I love lively discussion, so I want y'all to jump in the comments and tell me what you think. But this is a receipt. And it's a mighty scrumptious one at that. This is a receipt, y'all. This silence. Oh, this is a receipt. This is a receipt. This is a receipt. And that's another reason why I like to call this legally everywhere, because literally, look at this. When they started changing rules and policy and laws, offices and structures, it's everywhere, right? It's affecting everyone everywhere. So we have to ask questions. We have to be informed. I look forward to seeing what you all would like to say in the comments. I will continue to follow this story. I'm going to look just to see if there was any discussion on the other main page. Do I see any comments? That I might be able to answer here in real time? I do not. So I wish you all the best, and I will stay tuned as I look into this story. This is legally everywhere. We are looking into everything. Why? Because we're literally everywhere. Looking into everything. We are annotating. We are collecting the data. We are pulling receipts, okay? We are marinating and annotating, giving ourselves a moment to chill for a second and come back and have lively discussion, because these are things that we all should be able to know and speak about. And more importantly, they need to give us some information, because questions that need answers. Thank you so much for staying on my live and chit-chatting with me this afternoon. And I did have another planned story, but I had to jump right into this one. So if nothing else, thank you for visiting this station, right? Thank you for visiting the Civil Rights Station. Feel free to peruse other stations that I might have with other content. Definitely enjoy yourself while you're at this recipe buffet, because what did I always say? We eating over here. We are hungry. Oh, and this was scrumptious. Let us have some conversation in the comment section, and I look forward to seeing you in the next live. If by any chance you're like, I need more of this right now, go ahead and jump into the recipe buffet. Check out the different stations that I have. They are pinned as playlists. And I'll see you next time.